Signs of narcissistic parents. Was your or is your mum or dad a narcissist? And the effects it has on you. Having narcissistic parents can affect you as a child. It will often negatively impact your childhood, and when those childhood traumas are not healed, it can impact your adulthood. As a child, you might have never felt loved, heard or seen, that your reality and your feelings were not valid, that one or both of your parents treated you as an accessory and not a person. Things like how you look is more important than how you feel, that your intellect is more important than your emotions, that your sporting abilities are more important than the hobbies you'd enjoy, to keep your feelings bottled up, to not show any emotions, to put up with things that you shouldn't have to put up with. The whole stop crying before I give you something to cry about. So signs your parent was or is a narcissist. The image of your family home to the outside world was always perfect. However, it didn't quite match up what it was like inside the family home. There were lots of silence, one parent always hushing you with things like, you know what your mum or dad is like, or one would sulk and you felt like you could never approach them. Your birthdays and other special occasions were always ruined, or your parents would go overboard and find ways to make it all about them, as your parent always required that attention. Your parents were never ever wrong. They would never admit any fault. If they were, they would deny or pass the blame on to you. They would twist everything around and never apologise. Not in a genuine way. If they did apologise, it was always twisted onto why it was you or someone else's fault. They never took your thoughts or feelings or opinions on board. They would always put you down, criticise how you looked, how your choice in friends. They would always insult you. They would always insult your abilities. They gaslighted your reality. They would always claim that it didn't happen like that, or they never said that. They never promised you that. They might have always taken you to the doctors for issues you didn't even have. They would deny you love and affection unless you achieved something that they wanted you to achieve. You were not allowed to express your thoughts and feelings, as your parents would use these against you. They always lied to people or lied about people. They loved to just seem to put others down and always claim how your family was better than theirs, and always making other families inferior to yours. They were always the best out of their siblings. They were the perfect people in their family. Other family members were jealous and envious of them. They always took credit for your achievements and saying things like, you get that from me, or if you made a mistake, it'd be, you don't get that from me. They would just randomly barge into your bedroom over anything and everything, never giving you any privacy. They could pity play and guilt trip with the, after all I've done for you, or after all I do for you. They wouldn't listen or help you with your problems, or you didn't feel like you could talk to them about them, but they expected you to listen to theirs. And if you did go to them with one of yours, they would discuss about how one of theirs was far worse. It wouldn't be that two-way conversation to explain that they understand how you feel because they went through a similar experience. It would be turned straight around all onto them. They would ask you something and then compare how much better or worse it was for them. They were only interested in you if they felt like they had something to gain. They were extremely envious of you and believed they were entitled to whatever you have, as a narcissist will exploit others to meet a need of their own. If they wanted something that's yours when you're growing up, they feel entitled to just have it, as they lack the empathy, so they have no regard to your feelings. The whole what's yours is mine and what's mine's my own attitude. If you said anything to them about them they didn't like, whether you meant to or not, they would intimidate, threaten, or scream at you. You could have been the forgotten child where you just never felt like you existed in the home, the golden child that always had to perform for your parents, or the scapegoat that always got the blame, or it could have been all three, depending on what suited your parent at that time. You had to, in one way, parent your own parents, take care of them, comfort them, not just because they were ill all the time. You might have needed to take on extra chores around the house. Everything was a competition between siblings. Parents always had you competing for their attention and ending up walking on eggshells around your parent for fear of reactions. So some rules you might have needed to follow to keep your parents happy. 1, growing up with a narcissistic parent often means your reality was changed continuously on you, with gaslighting words of, "It didn't happen like that," "I never promised that," "I never said that," as the narcissistic parent wants to keep up the false image in the home and the false image of who they are, and you shouldn't question that image. The whole do as I say and not as I do. 2, that you had to keep the family image going to the outside world. You had to keep secrets, or you might have been told to lie about places you've been or things you have, told to speak positively about the family, and you might have received threats such as, "Stop that, you're embarrassing me," or "Just wait until we get home." 3, you might have never been allowed to make a mistake, and as people we make mistakes. It's part of the learning process, so when you did, you were told things like, "You're such a disappointment," or you received those silent treatments, often the golden child, whereas the scapegoat would have received the blame for everything. "You're so ungrateful, you don't get that from me." 4, that you had to be perfect for what your parents' ideal of perfection was to get any love, affection, or support from them. 5, you had to act like an adult and take care of your parents' emotional needs. "It's not a big deal, grow up," or "You're so selfish," and things like, "It hurts me more than it does you." You might have had to do all the chores around the house, not chores to earn pocket money. You were expected to do your parents' roles in the house. You were expected to look after your siblings. 6, never quite understanding what was happening because you were always getting those mixed messages. Things like, "I love you, but I don't like you," or "Children should be seen and not heard." The narcissistic parents' traits can have a lot of effects on you growing up. So here's a few examples. The trait of grandiosity, so feeling like you cannot do anything right, that you cannot measure up no matter how hard you try, feeling like you're not enough, feeling like a trophy to them. And even as that trophy, no matter what you do, just does not seem adequate for your parent. Preoccupied with themselves, so you end up feeling like you have no value and developing a lack of self-worth. Entitlement, so you end up feeling like you're not important and you're only here to serve others' needs exactly how they want. Feelings of embarrassment or shame when out with them and they're being rude to staff. A belief they are special, so you end up with feelings like you have to please them to feel loved. Arrogance, so feelings of confusion as they act like the perfect parent in front of others, and friends might say, "Wow, your mum or dad is amazing," and they act like the parent you would like or the parent you see other children have. Yet at home, they sulk and they ignore you, only paying you attention if they want something from you. their lack of empathy. So you feel like you've always got to bottle up your emotions, as you always feel misunderstood or wrong in having those normal emotions. Envy, so always feeling embarrassed or ashamed if they spoke about any of your flaws, and they would speak about your strengths. They would put your strengths down and make you feel insecure about your own strengths. So you would then feel embarrassed about your strengths because they were envious of these. They had to belittle these. They had to put these down. So even the things that you were good at, because everybody is good at something. Everyone has to work at things to become good at things. But a narcissistic parent would pick and poke at your flaws and at your strengths to put you down. Or they would speak loudly about others' flaws in front of you, or things that they were envious of about other people. So you might feel embarrassed or ashamed when around them in public. Feelings of not being enough when they would invalidate you. Requires excessive attention, as your parent always needed that attention, either the vulnerable, always playing the victim, or the grandiose, being over the top and always needing the limelight. You might have felt like a shadow and an extension to them, only wanted when they needed you to help them out or they needed you to show you off. Exploitation. You might have never felt like you were treated right, but couldn't quite work out what was happening as a young child. So perhaps not seeing why you felt like you were not being treated right, but just seeing within the family dynamics that people were not treated as equals. They were often treated unfairly and always to suit the parents' needs. As you grow, you feel more valued for what you do for the parent rather than for who you are as an individual. You might throw yourself into achieving things, yet still not feeling enough no matter how much you accomplish. You might downplay your achievements for fear of getting them invalidated by other people. You might try and seek approval from others. It can go one or two ways. You can either downplay who you are to avoid that attention, to avoid any feelings of being ashamed or being put down or being invalidated by another person, or you might go all out to try and seek that attention that you never received as a child. Childhood trauma in adulthood can manifest as lots of different things, whether the childhood trauma is direct or witnessed. It can affect adulthood and manifest as things like confusion, trying to forget the trauma completely, or trying to suppress any emotions that you have from those traumas, or suppress any emotions you have in your adulthood. Full of self-doubt, self-blame, people-pleasing, trying to help others, putting others' needs before your own because you know how it feels to be misunderstood. You know how it feels to be let down, so you don't want other people feeling like that. Afraid of saying no, often having a panic about saying no because you were trained by your parents not to say no, and there was that genuine fear of consequences because you received consequences if you said no to them. So when it comes to being an adult, you can almost dread having to say no to other people for fear of their reactions. Not feeling enough, seeking external validation from other people or from external sources. Accepting behaviour from others that you should never have accepted. Often looking back at your childhood and thinking, well, my mum did that, so that's normal, right? Oh, my dad did that, so that must be normal. So we end up accepting behaviours that we should never have accepted because we believe it to be normal when it is far from normal. It's actually abuse, mental or physical or emotional. We can often end up if we had narcissistic parents, we can often end up with lots of narcissistic friends, or we can end up with narcissistic partners. We can end up around a lot of narcissistic people because they're the kinds of people that we are used to in one way. They're the people that we believe is just how people are. And because we do feel guilt, because we do people please, they are attracted to us because we serve their needs. We can have difficulty setting boundaries because we're trying to keep other people happy, forgetting that we need to be happy within ourselves. Always living in that hypervigilance or living on high alert, fear of abandonment. Often due to the stress of childhood trauma, can contribute to living with so many different chronic illnesses that are related to the childhood trauma. We can end up battling anxiety, battling depression, battling CPTSD. It can often be confused. Having CPTSD can be confused with having things like borderline personality disorder. When you haven't actually got borderline personality disorder, you might have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So you've been treated for that when you need to be treated for complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's different things. If you're listening to this and you have been diagnosed as BPD, do not take my word for it and think I am not BPD, because you could and you might need the treatment that you are receiving so that you can live your best life. The similarities between the behaviours of overcoming these two things can be confused as one for being the other, or vice versa. You may feel criticised and judged by people instead of accepted and loved by people, and you may not learn appropriate boundaries for relationships. Recovery from narcissistic parents, there's lots of different avenues you can go down to recover from narcissistic parents, and it's about finding what works for you. Keep going until you find what works for you. So if you find a therapist and that therapist does not seem to get you, it doesn't mean they're rubbish at their job. They might be rubbish at their job, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're rubbish at their job. It just means they're not the therapist for you. Remember, you are employing them to help you. And if you don't feel that they are helping you, you have every right to find a new therapist. Same as the life coaches that are popping up. There is some amazing life coaches out there. There's some that just want to exploit you, and there's some that are completely rubbish. Again, if you don't feel like you're getting what you're paying for, if you don't feel like they are helping you in your journey, if you feel like you're always going back to where you started and never moving forward, and that can happen, but there's got to be some progress coming in there somewhere. So if you don't feel comfortable with that person, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're not good at what they do. It means that you are not gelling with them. They are not gelling with you. Just find one that works for you, and don't worry about no longer working with them. Fire a quick email saying it's just not working out, I'm sorry, and just leave that therapist, leave that coach to it, and find one that works for you. Same as counsellors. Find the counselling that helps you as an individual. If you don't feel like it's working for you, it is not working for you. So seeking the right support, one you feel happy and comfortable with, to work through past traumas, to open up to, and working through any emotions. We don't always need that sort of therapy. We can do things like meditation and yoga. These are often found to be very helpful, as is exercise. These can release natural chemicals that help us. We can actually learn from books. We can learn from courses. We can learn from other people on YouTube. We can learn from other people in groups that have lived it, different methods, different techniques that they have tried to find the ones that work for us. Trying those things that you always wanted to do as a child but were never allowed to do. So you're in one way discovering your passions, your goals, your dreams, your hobbies for you. Writing out how you talk to yourself, as it can often be how your parents spoke to you. We can often be speaking to ourselves how our abuser spoke to us, and we can then end up putting ourselves down. So writing it out and picking up on that inner voice that doesn't serve you and throwing it back out and creating a voice that lifts you up. I shall add in the description the video to explain more on limiting beliefs and how to remove those limiting beliefs, because being raised by narcissistic parents, we often end up having that I can't do it attitude, and we need to swap it round to I can. I'll add the video on don't argue with a narcissist, because if we are still around narcissistic parents, the best advice is to go no contact, but this isn't always possible. So it's finding ways to handle yourself around them in the right way so that they can no longer negatively impact your life. And I'll add the video in the description for overcoming self-doubt. That explains how they get you to doubt and blame yourself and how you can recover from this. And I'll also add the video about self-esteem, how narcissists do destroy self-esteem, and some methods to try and reclaim your self-esteem. And it's all about finding the right method that works for you. Thank you very much for all the returning subscribers and all the amazing comments. If you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. I'll also add the links to the online courses in the description. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope everyone has an amazing day. Bye.